Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Stories from the Field, Implementing Cold Storage Solutions at Storm King Art Center. I have just a few housekeeping notes to mention. If you have any sound or technical issues today, please let me know in the chat box with a direct message. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording, along with the PDF version of the slideshow, will be sent out to all registrants within the next week or so. And finally, we do have some built-in time at the end to answer any questions that may come up, but please feel free to type them in the chat box at any point throughout the presentation. And before we get started, I just wanted to share a little bit about the Documentary Heritage Preservation Services for New York for anyone who is unfamiliar with us. DHPSNY, as we like to call it, is a collaboration between the New York State Archives Documentary Heritage Program and the New York State Library Conservation and Preservation Program, with services provided by the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts. DHPSNY is a statewide program that provides free planning and educational services to support the vast network of collecting institutions, such as archives, libraries, historical societies, museums, and other organizations that safeguard and ensure access to New York's historical records and library research materials. DHPSNY services include archival needs assessments, preservation and conservation surveys, guidance with strategic planning, and access to a variety of educational programs, such as this webinar. To learn more about our services, please visit dhpsny.org. That's dhpsny.org. And with that, I pass this along to today's presenter, Christine Persche, Archivist at the Storm King Art Center.
Good morning. This is Christine Persche. Thank you so much for having me, DHPSNY. I am very grateful to have been asked to give this presentation because it's a chance for me to give something back. DHPSNY for us has been a great resource. It's workshops, best practices, the collegial support, and that's really the tone of today's presentation, colleague to colleague. Storm King is not an enormous institution. We had the benefit of receiving a grant back in 2016, which made all the difference to us. And I'd like to share some specifics of how we used it in terms of cold storage. Storm King is a 500-acre outdoor museum for sculpture located in New York's Hudson Valley. It opened in 1960, and our name came from Storm King Mountain, which is a dramatic peak overlooking the Hudson River 2 miles to the east. We work out of a French-inspired Normandy chateau built in the early 30s by a man named Vermont Hatch. And as you can tell from these photos, these archival photos, it has a lot of nooks and crannies, and that means accumulation. So when I arrived in the fall of 2016, 1 month later, we received the Henry Luce Foundation grant for the archives, and it started a process of surveying, deaccessioning. All of these are familiar sites to you all, I'm sure. Flattening, processing. We really went through a large cleanup process. And we were able to choose a database, collective access, to manage our archival, library, and art collection holdings. We've been very happy with it. It's allowed us to grow in numerous ways throughout the years. It feeds our front end collection and exhibition sites and our archives homepage, which was launched in May of 2018, highlighting the oral histories and special collections. Many archival items have been scanned, catalogs, integrated with presentations of collections, artists, exhibitions, and our oral histories throughout the site. The oral history program was an important component of our archives renaissance due to the grant. And we were so pleased to have it be a digital expression, because in our cleanup, we also found in a deep, dark garage on site, boxes and boxes of film material. 2 films had been done, one in the early 90s, Sculptors at Storm King, and the second one by the same filmmaker, Bruce Bassett, 2 Men at Storm King in 2005. And these films and film materials were various. They were VHS, acetate, nitrate film. So we started to really research the benefits of cold storage for film, because we didn't have money to do anything with the collection yet, to digitize it or to preserve it in any way. So we thought, how do we keep it in a fairly good state for future use? So Cold storage will double the life expectancy of film. It prevents mold growth and curling, and essentially it will keep your film in a state, in stasis until you have the resources to support it further. In addition to this film collection, we also had a very large collection of 4x5 transparencies. And in the course of our cold storage research, we also realized that most photographic media benefits from storage at some temperature lower than room temperature, some more than others. So color materials usually benefit more than black and white. And then there are also some materials that you don't want to put in cold storage, like Polaroids or daguerreotypes or tintypes. So those are not good candidates. But all of this information is readily available online. My feeling is actually that there's too much information online in that sense. It's actually more important to sort of simplify your search so that you get the information you actually need. But the questions driving, determining what we actually needed were along the lines of how many cubic feet of materials do I have? And how much will this collection grow? And how are the items currently stored? And what are the dimensions of my storage boxes? So again, we had to pull out everything in those boxes and understand what the collection was composed of. We needed to know how often it might be used. Did we need to do some scanning or some digitizing before we put it into cold storage? Where would the space be to house this collection? Again, at certain points, we became overwhelmed with the process, but essentially we realized that cold storage was going to be our answer. It was going to support our materials until we could do something further with them. So even before we thoroughly understood the nature of the processing of the collection, we needed to stop any deterioration that had been occurring for actually the last 30 or so years as far as those film materials went. So this is an example of one of the many pieces of information you can find online. It gets technical pretty fast. Nitrate, acetate, polyester, film. This is regarding the film materials. And it gave us a little pause because the minute you start digging into film, you hear some horror stories of, nitrate being combustible, or, what kind of film do I really have? I'm not an expert. So again, we looked at our materials, we took the technical details, we went in search further of specifics, and we did learn that a lot of our 16mm stock, we were comforted to learn that it was only not manufactured on acetate up until the 50s. I'm sorry, past the 50s, it was only manufactured on acetate or polyester. So right immediately, we had no problems with the nitrate concerns. And we proceeded sort of like that, picking it apart, picking the details apart, confirming with reputable resources online what we had and what we could do with it safely. So this is an example of the dramatic increases in life expectancy you can get from some very basic changes in terms of temperature and humidity control. You start with 75 degrees, which is, not impossible for some basic storage conditions. 25 years of significant change in terms of preservation. We are actually at the level of the 3,700. We have our film materials now in a 0-degree freezer with humidity control. And so that gives me great comfort that at some point we'll have the resources to work further with the collection and hopefully bring it to a more accessible state. But to back up, we did a little bit of conferring with our colleagues. We had some contacts at the Whitney who recommended this version, the Turbo Air refrigerator and freezer. We purchased one of each. It's still the most economical method to maintain a cold storage environment for small collections. Of course, a very privileged situation would be to have a room outfitted in a cold storage environment, but we found these freestanding units to be very workable. However, because of their defrost cycle, you do need to vapor wrap every box, not every item individually, but by box. And we chose to do it with a polypropylene heavyweight 6mm bag that we double wrapped. And we did it ourselves. We purchased the materials from Gaylord. We also had the all-important humidity indicators, which should be put in every bag to give it proper controls and sort of visible from the outside in. And this is it proudly stocked in our freezer. This is the film collection. Happily, you're seeing no pinks in those humidity indicators. We do check it monthly. And we have all the details of the collection, from the cataloging numbers to the phone numbers you need to call if there's a problem, and also procedures. One of the things about vapor wrapping packages is that they need to be brought, if you do need to access them, they do need to be brought to room temperature before being opened. So that's just to prevent any condensation from getting into those packages. And you don't want to do this too often, and you don't want to keep it out for too long, or else it will negate your cold storage benefits. We haven't had too much of a problem. We have pulled these out once or twice, some of them for various requests. And we're also in the process of digitizing some of them as we find access to certain funds for the archives. Now, resources are important for this. The refrigerator and the freezer, at the time they were purchased in 2018, cost about $5,000. But we also had lots of intern support. Labor is important. That packaging, that vapor wrapping, though you do get a rhythm, and it is sort of like gift wrapping, you need lots of hands sort of holding it in place to securely seal the packages, and also just to, it depends on how many materials you have, but it did take us quite a number of hours. But what we found was that as we kept communicating this investment in the archives, and we kept celebrating the fact that we were truly supporting our collection in this pretty, for some, it seemed like a very technical way, but we found the archives being used more. It certainly attracted more attention to our collection, and that was incredibly gratifying. We also, and I'm going to share a quote that I really love from Mark Green. When he was asked what he felt was the most important attribute for an archivist to possess, he named creativity, being able to look at tried and true processes, think about them in new ways that make them more efficient and relative to new users. So we did, in the few recordings that we were able to digitize, we shared them with the docents. We had a listening party, something that had not been done before. We incorporated these recordings into our finding aids. And we also were able to use the transcripts in our digital exhibition, which was launched last year in May, which really enhanced this history of Storm King with primary source voices, and it just did a lot to tell the true story of Storm King from various perspectives. So Storm King, we're proud to have been able to implement this solution in a relatively small but significant way. We have many more stories to tell. At this point, we still have room in our refrigerator for further prints. We're going to keep adding, identifying, prioritizing collections. I chose the most vulnerable film collection to take up the most space in our collection, seconded by our transparency collection. If we do need to grow further, we'll simply add another unit. George Rickey, who is another artist in our collection, wrote, "Technology is not art, but every art has its technology. I do not develop technology for its own sake or to cause wonder, only in response to my felt need." And I felt this was relevant with cold storage because, again, I emphasize there is a lot of technical information out there that sometimes we felt out of our elements because we weren't chemists and we weren't actually experts in film material. But the bottom line is that it's a very simple concept. What could be older than cold? And the satisfaction I get in terms of knowing that this material is protected until we get to discover it further makes me feel like I'm doing all we can for Storm King's collection. So it's a bit of an overview, but please, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them now, or I will get back to you with further info. So thanks so much. So the other, one of the questions is, what other refrigerators or freezer brands did you consider buying? Well, to be honest with you, we simply went straightforwardly with the recommendation from the Whitney. We felt once we determined the dimensions were correct, we did not comparison shop with that particular detail. We did look into various vapor wrapping options. There are various options with that. We just found the bags to be the simplest way for us to use this material for other uses as well. We didn't want to invest that much into the vapor wrap before if we didn't need to use quite as much. So we bought a ton of bags, which we're still using in other capacities as well. Absolutely. There are some very good resources. The National Park Service, their conservograms have some great essays on various cold storage applications for photographs. Let me see here. The film, let's see. Feel free to put your email in the chat and I can get back to you with a list of those resources I used. But I do know that conservograms were a great place to start in terms of very understandable language and strategy. Oh, thank you. I will get back to you right away. The environment, let's see. Do you have lessons learned to share, maybe unexpected challenges? Do you monitor the environment inside the fridge freezer? So the wonderful thing about those humidity indicators, and we were very fortunate to have a preservation survey done by DHPSNY, confirming that those humidity indicators are our best shot at identifying problems if they're not working, but also confirming that they are working with their, you look for a color change in terms of a humidity change. So we monitor them monthly, and we have found that that is enough of a span to give us a sense that all is well within the environment of the freezer and fridge. Let's see, the challenges that we found, actually the wrapping was not that easy, which is why I mentioned that intern support of more than one hand, sometimes wrapping a package. It's a tricky thing to get it as airtight as possible, even though mostly what we were wrapping were rectangular boxes. But that requires a knack, and nimble fingers. Please repeat the question. You had just answered the last one, but we don't know exactly what was asked. Okay, forgive me. The question was asked, what challenges did we face in this process? So I mentioned the wrapping, and then how do we monitor the situation, the humidity, and also if the cold storage is working within the freezer or fridge, and that we do mostly by our monthly checks on the humidity indicators. I will be happy to send the list of resources that we referenced for the information we used to DHPSNY, and then hopefully it can be sent with the recording. Okay, what type brand of vapor barrier bags did we choose? So we purchased them from Gaylord, and they were pretty much the general polypropylene. They do recommend a heavyweight 6 mil for cold storage situations. And so we, again, double bagged these items and used tape to seal it around all the seams. It was a zipper lock bag to begin with, but we gave it an extra security with tape around the sides. So it wasn't exactly a brand, but it was, as long as it's polypropylene, as long as it's heavyweight and minimum 6 mil, that's what's recommended. Actually, minimum is 4 mil, but we chose the 6 mil. The question is, are there increased energy costs with the unit? How did you budget for that? Well, we have not actually experienced any increased energy costs with it. The units were fairly energy efficient. They are not in the museum building, the chateau that I showed. They're in a separate building on site, along with other utilities in a basement. So, as with many things at Storm King, it's sort of a joint collective. It is not an archival cost to run those machines for us. So we have not budgeted further for that expense. I'm wondering about here, have you noticed a temperature change in the room the freezer is kept in? I'm wondering about the heat output of the freezer. That's a really good thought. Again, based on what I just described, this basement is naturally, we have not noticed any heat output. No one works in that space. It is not air conditioned. I have not noticed any change in temperature when I go down. However, it is a basement setting. So I guess it depends on your situation in terms of if you're actually working in that environment of the fridge or freezer. But for us, it's a utilitarian setting. And so we've not noticed any sort of problem with its with the environment it's creating. Another question: would you share any details learned, lessons learned, and challenges about installing and maintaining the cold storage unit? Are there RH cartridges? We did, once we purchased the fridge, the freezer first, installed it successfully, no problems, have never had a problem. Our refrigerator, however, did appear to be leaking early on. It was under warranty and someone, a representative, came out and fixed it very efficiently. So I wasn't concerned, and so far it's been working fine since then. So we did hit a little bit of a bump, but I think we chose a reputable place and brand, and we have not had any problems since then. There's been no maintenance beyond that, as far as I know. We do have a very active buildings and grounds crew. And again, some of this is a bit shared. They were instrumental in setting it up for us. We did call on other resources at Storm King. So although this is an archival project and an archival resource, we have the benefit of having some really good people supporting these units in places where they actually work as opposed to us. So they do keep an eye on it for us as well. We did not explore RH cartridges. That might be a good thing for me to look at now. We were content to stay with the indicators placed in each wrapped package. So do you have a water monitor alarm in the space with the freezers? Not as far as I know. Thank you. I'm learning as much here as perhaps you are. I will check with our buildings and grounds crew. Again, these units are installed in a place that is not ignored, that is worked in, or they do a lot with some conservation efforts in this very space. So I'm comforted by the fact that if there was a problem, someone would notice it. In addition to my monthly checks, which again aren't daily, so it's very comforting to know that people are working in that space and will notice a problem. I suppose if it were in a much lonelier space, a monitor and an alarm would be very helpful, but thankfully we have that covered. Storm King is such a unique place in terms of it is such a rugged outdoor space that requires a lot of that kind of support, that equipment like this doesn't seem out of place at all. And thankfully we have people who know what they, how to support them. So another question, thank you for this presentation. Do you have any alarm notifications in place for power outages? Also, did you separate out all magnetic track film materials? I may have missed your addressing. Okay, let's see. We did not have any magnetic track film materials. So we were on the lookout for them, but in this case, we didn't have to do any sort of sorting like that. We didn't include VHS, of course. Certain films that we were hoping to digitize sooner, we did not include. But for the most part, everything was vapor wrapped and put into the freezer. As far as an alarm notification, I will check on this. When I'm back on site tomorrow, I will, with our head of buildings and grounds, and make sure that in terms of a power outage, I mean, I believe the building that they are housed in is supported by a generator. So I will double check that and see what he can tell me. Yes, the room that they are held in, the question is, are there security mechanisms on these units? The units themselves can be locked. However, the room that they're kept in is locked. So we do not, it's not open in any way to anybody beyond that group that works in that room, as well as the archivists who need to check on the log. We chose not to lock them because, again, our special situation, not everyone is on site at any particular point. So we have them locked in the room, but not the units. I did make sure that the units could be locked if necessary, if they end up moving to a different space. So let's see if there's anything else. And these details are all very important. I'm grateful for being reminded. We were not on site for a very long time. It caused me some pain to know that I wasn't able to check on the log for a while. But again, Storm King, thankfully, always had people on site for us throughout the pandemic. And you know, re-engaging with it again and revisiting all these things, I was very, very happy to see that the system's held up. But we will support as much as possible. And I would like to check on that alarm situation and power outage if necessary. Yes, what are the internal cold storage environment conditions, temp and RH, the humidity control? So we have our freezer set at 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and we have our refrigerator set at 32 degrees. The RH is going to be in the recommended categories of either 30 to 50%. I think for both, it's very, very low. I think it's more in the 30% arena, but I'd have to double check that. Happy to get back to you if you'd like to leave your email address. I can also include it. It will be in the list of references that we used in terms of identifying these numbers. I just noticed another question. Are these units recommended for use within archival cold storage rooms? I really could see, I don't see why not. I believe our previous question about do they emit temperature, heat, or that's worth researching, of course. I didn't have that concern given that we were not working among them, but that is something to make sure of. I think these were I know that these were high quality units, so I would hope that they don't off-put too much heat, but I'm afraid I don't have the answer to that one. Oh, what was the name of the brand? Sorry, I missed it. Let me see here. Hold on, please. So we got the Turbo Air M3 series of refrigerator and freezer. Turbo Air.
Okay, well, I am not seeing any more questions in the chat. So with that, I would like to thank you all for joining us today. And thank you, Christine, for such a wonderful presentation. Thank you for sharing your journey in cold storage with us. If you enjoyed today's presentation and would like to learn more about our upcoming educational programs, please check out dipsny.org/education. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks again for joining.